Let me create a detailed 8-part outline for this story about a mother abandoning her child. Hannah introduces herself as a 37-year-old art therapist from Seattle. Brief mention of seemingly normal childhood in suburban Michigan until age 14. Mother's sudden announcement about moving one ordinary Tuesday morning. The confusing 7-hour drive with her younger brother Lucas. Arrival at an unfamiliar house belonging to a complete stranger. Mother's shocking disappearance without warning. Foreshadowing that this abandonment ultimately led to a better life. Call to action for viewers to share where they're watching from and subscribe. Hannah's childhood in working-class Michigan neighborhood with mother Diane, stepfather Rick, and younger brother Lucas. Mother's unstable personality, frequent mood swings, and unpredictable parenting style. Series of different uncles and boyfriends cycling through their lives. Hannah's role as protector and surrogate parent to 9-year-old Lucas. Financial struggles, frequent moves, and school changes throughout childhood. Happy moments that kept Hannah hopeful, rare family outings, mother's occasional affection, mother's increasing drug use and erratic behavior in months leading up to abandonment. Hannah's attempts to maintain normalcy for Lucas despite growing household chaos. Tension between mother and stepfather Rick, who recently left after a major fight. The night before the abandonment, mother's mysterious phone call and frantic packing. Morning of the abandonment, mother waking Hannah and Lucas at 5 a.m. Mother's announcement, get in the car, we're moving, don't ask questions. Rushed packing with only one backpack each allowed. The tense 7-hour drive in mother's old Buick crossing state lines. Lucas's confusion and fear, Hannah trying to comfort him. Mother's bizarre behavior during the trip, paranoid glances, chain smoking, taking unknown pills. Arrival at an unfamiliar house in a rural area of northern Indiana. Introduction to Grace, an elderly woman Hannah had never seen before. Mother's cryptic explanation, this is my Aunt Grace. You're staying with her for a while. The devastating moment, mother asking to borrow Hannah's Nokia phone, then driving away without goodbye. Initial shock, disbelief, and desperate hope that she would return soon. Grace's awkward explanation that she was actually no relation, just an acquaintance of mother's friend. The horrible realization this was no temporary situation. They had been abandoned. First traumatic night in a stranger's home. Comforting terrified Lucas. Learning Grace was a retired nurse with no children who occasionally took in emergency cases. Grace's kindness, despite the bizarre circumstances. The painful first week of waiting by the phone for mother's call that never came. Attempts to contact mother, disconnected number. No forwarding address. Grace reluctantly contacting authorities after a week. Initial meetings with social services and police. The investigation revealing mother had crossed state lines to avoid local authorities. Discovery that mother had been investigated for neglect multiple times. Lucas's emotional breakdown and regression to bedwetting and nightmares. Hannah's overwhelming responsibility for her brother's well-being. The surreal experience of becoming emergency foster children. Grace's decision to temporarily care for them while permanent arrangements were made. School enrollment challenges without proper documentation. Hannah's mixture of grief, rage, and secret relief at escaping mother's chaos. Navigating the complicated foster care system across state lines. Grace becoming their temporary foster parent while authorities searched for relatives. The legal complications of abandonment versus surrender of parental rights. Failed attempts to locate their biological fathers. Discovery that stepfather Rick had no legal rights to claim them. Hannah's fear of being separated from Lucas in the system. First encounters with supportive professionals, kind social worker, Marion, school counselor, doctor. Jimenez. Gradual adjustment to life with Grace. Structure, regular meals, homework time. Grace's simple but stable home becoming a safe haven. Lucas slowly emerging from trauma bonding with Grace's gentle dog. Hannah's conflicted emotions, grief for lost mother, anger at abandonment, guilt at feeling safer. First therapy sessions revealing extent of previous household dysfunction. School challenges, catching up academically, explaining their situation to peers. Hannah's determination to create stability for Lucas despite uncertainty. The 6-month mark realization that mother wasn't coming back. Mixed feelings about this truth. After 8 months with Grace, unexpected visit from maternal grandmother Eleanor. Revelation that Eleanor had been searching for them since learning of daughter's disappearance. Eleanor's story estrangement from Diane due to drug issues years before. Emotional reunion and difficult conversations about the past. Eleanor offering them a permanent home in her small Massachusetts town. The heart-wrenching decision to leave Grace, who had become a surrogate mother. Grace's encouragement to embrace this chance for family connection and stability, moving across country to Eleanor's cozy Cape Cod home, adjustment to new school community and family dynamics. Eleanor's stable, nurturing presence filling parental void. Therapeutic support helping both children process abandonment. Hannah's academic improvements in stable environment. Lucas thriving with consistent routines and grandmother's attention. Occasional updates from police about mother's whereabouts crossing state lines. Minor arrests. The difficult truth, mother had abandoned them to avoid drug charges and continued choosing addiction over her children. Hannah's pivotal moment deciding to build a future rather than wait for mother's return. 5 years with grandmother Hannah, excelling in high school, discovering art therapy. Lucas becoming well-adjusted teenager involved in sports. Grandmother's unwavering support of their education and emotional needs. Therapy helping Hannah understand mother's addiction as disease while acknowledging the genuine abandonment. One brief, disappointing phone call from mother 3 years after abandonment. Hannah's realization sometimes absence of toxic relationships allows healthy ones to flourish. College applications and grandmother's pride in Hannah's resilience. Art therapy workshops revealing Hannah's gift for helping other trauma survivors. Scholarship to State University where Hannah studied psychology and art. Lucas's stability and normal teenage development despite early trauma. Forming chosen family, deep friendships, mentors, and supportive relationships. Hannah's college professor becoming important mentor in art therapy field. Occasional triggers and grief moments, still arising but manageable. Learning to navigate relationships with healthy boundaries despite abandonment issues. Meeting future husband in graduate school, his patient understanding of her past. Grandmother's wisdom helping Hannah separate her identity from her mother's choices. Hannah today, successful art therapist working with traumatized children. Creation of special program for children with absent parents. Lucas's success as high school science teacher and new father. The day Hannah received news of mother's death from overdose. Complex grief process, mourning the mother she needed. Not the one she had, finding unexpected closure through creating memorial art project. Grandmother Eleanor's crucial role in breaking cycle of dysfunction. Hannah's wedding day without mother but surrounded by true family. Birth of Hannah's daughter and commitment to different parenting path. What abandonment taught her about resilience, chosen family, and breaking cycles. Lucas's journey to forgiveness and healing. Last visit with Grace before her passing, thanking her for changing their trajectory. Recognition that being abandoned ultimately saved them from continuing damage. Understanding that being left behind created space for better influences. The truth about family, sometimes it's who raises you, not who births you. Concluding thought that abandonment, while traumatic, redirected her to a healthier life path. Final call to action, asking viewers to share their own stories of overcoming family trauma, inviting comments, likes, subscriptions, and shares. This detailed outline creates a compelling narrative arc that follows the emotional journey requirements while providing ample material to expand to 10,000 words. The protagonist is an American woman in her 30s, and all elements create a cohesive story of abandonment that ultimately leads to a better life path. Now I'll create the complete 10,000-word story based on this outline. My name is Hannah, and I'm 37, an art therapist working with trauma survivors in Seattle. When I was 14, my life changed forever on an ordinary Tuesday morning. My mother Diane shook me awake at dawn, her eyes wild with an energy I recognized as trouble. "Get in the car," she said. "We're moving. Don't ask questions." 7 hours later, she pulled up to a stranger's farmhouse in rural Indiana, introduced us to a woman I'd never seen before, and then drove away without looking back. I watched her taillights disappear down that gravel road, not knowing I would never see her again. Strangely, being abandoned by my mother was the best thing that ever happened to me. Before I share my story, drop a comment, letting me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had your life change in a single moment, hit that subscribe button and like this video to join others who understand that sometimes our worst days lead to our best lives. Before that Tuesday in September, my life with my mother had always been unpredictable, but I never imagined she would simply drive away and never return. We lived in a working-class neighborhood in Flint, Michigan, where the factory layoffs had hollowed out entire blocks, leaving behind boarded windows and fading hopes. Our small rental house needed repairs my mother never got around to making. Peeling wallpaper in the kitchen, a bathroom faucet that dripped constantly, and drafty windows we covered with plastic sheets each winter. My mother Diane was beautiful in a worn-out way, with blonde hair. She dyed herself from a box and tired blue eyes that could still light up when she laughed. But those laughing moments grew increasingly rare as I got older. She had me when she was just 19, dropping out of community college to work waitressing jobs and later as a receptionist at a car dealership. My brother Lucas came 5 years later during her brief marriage to his father, who disappeared before Lucas could even remember his face. Growing up, I learned early to read my mother's moods. Some days she'd be full of energy, making pancakes shaped like animals and taking us to the park or dollar movies. Other days, she'd barely leave her bedroom, calling out for me to make sandwiches for Lucas and myself, the blinds drawn against whatever pain she couldn't face that day. "You're my little adult," she would sometimes say, stroking my hair when I brought her tea or pain relievers. "What would I do without you, Hannah Banana?" I both treasured and resented these moments, craving her affection while feeling the heavy weight of responsibility no child should carry. By the time I was 12, I was effectively running our household, making simple meals, helping Lucas with homework, and even figuring out which bills needed to be paid first when money ran short at the end of the month. When Lucas was scared during thunderstorms, it was my bed he crawled into, not our mother's. Then Rick came into our lives. He worked at the same car dealership as my mother and drove a shiny black truck that seemed out of place in our neighborhood. At first, his presence brought a positive change. My mother smiled, more, started wearing makeup again, and even took us all out for pizza on Friday nights. For about 6 months, we almost felt like a normal family, but Rick was just the latest in a string of uncles who had cycled through our lives over the years. There was Uncle Dave, who drank too much and got loud. Uncle Tommy, who brought us gifts but made me uncomfortable with his lingering hugs. Uncle Paul, who lasted almost 2 years until he moved to Florida for a construction job. None of them stuck around, but Rick had moved in, bringing his collection of sports memorabilia and filling our small refrigerator with beer cans. The argument started about 8 months into their relationship. At first, they tried to keep their voices down, but soon their fights would shake the thin walls of our house. I would turn up the small TV in the bedroom I shared with Lucas, or read him stories to drown out the shouting. "Why do Mum and Rick fight so much?" 9-year-old Lucas would ask, his brown eyes wide with worry. "Grown-ups just do that sometimes." I would answer, not knowing what else to say. "It doesn't mean anything bad will happen." But things did get worse. My mother started missing work, sleeping late into the afternoon. She lost weight, her clothes hanging from her increasingly thin frame. I found unfamiliar pills in her purse when I was searching for lunch money. Sometimes she would be unnaturally energetic, cleaning the house at midnight or rearranging furniture only to crash for days afterward. Rick moved out after a particularly explosive fight 3 weeks before the day she abandoned us. I came home from school to find him loading his things into his truck. "Your mom's got problems I can't fix, kid," he told me as he carried out his prized signed football. "Tell Lucas I said goodbye, all right." After Rick left, my mother spiraled further. She would leave for hours or even days without explanation, returning with bloodshot eyes and a jittery restlessness that scared me. During these absences, I would use the emergency $20 she kept in a kitchen drawer to buy groceries at the corner store, making up excuses to Lucas about why Mum wasn't home. The night before she abandoned us, I woke up around midnight to the sound of her voice. She was on the phone in the kitchen, speaking in the urgent whisper she used when she didn't want us to overhear. "I can't stay here anymore," I heard her say. "They're asking questions at work. No, I don't have enough for all of us. Just for a while until I get things figured out." The next morning, she woke us before dawn. "Get up now, quietly. Pack 1 backpack each, just essentials," my mother instructed, already pulling clothes from our dresser drawers and tossing them onto our beds. "We need to be on the road in 15 minutes. Lucas rubbed his eyes, confusion clouding his young face. "Where are we going, Mum?" "Somewhere better," she answered vaguely. "No more questions. Just pack." I recognized the frantic energy humming through her movements, the same jittery urgency that accompanied her worst decisions. My stomach knotted with dread as I helped Lucas choose what to bring, knowing from experience that arguing would only escalate her agitation. "Can I bring Rocket?" Lucas asked, Ostets, clutching his worn, stuffed dog that had been his constant companion since babyhood. "Yes, but hurry up," I answered before our mother could object. I quickly stuffed our toothbrushes, some clean underwear, and a few t-shirts into our backpacks, grabbing my school notebook and the dog-eared copy of Harry Potter that Lucas and I were reading together. As an afterthought, I tucked the photo of us at the lake last summer into my pocket, one of the rare happy days when our mother had been truly present with us. Within 20 minutes, yes, we were in my mother's rusting Buick Lucas, and I still in our pajama pants with jackets hastily thrown over t-shirts. The early morning air was crisp with early autumn chill, our breath forming small clouds as we hurried to the car. Our mother tossed a duffel bag into the trunk and slid into the driver's seat, lighting a cigarette before even starting the engine. "Buckle up," she said, exhaling smoke toward the cracked window. "We've got a long drive ahead." As we pulled away from the only neighborhood Lucas and I had ever known, I turned to watch our small rental house disappear from view. Something in my chest tightened with the certainty that we wouldn't be coming back. The 7-hour drive remains a blur of highway exits, gas station bathrooms, and tense silence broken only by Lucas's occasional questions, which our mother either ignored or answered with irritable vagueness. She chain-smoked the entire journey, her fingers drumming restlessly on the steering wheel when they weren't holding a cigarette. Every hour or so, she would check the rearview mirror with quick, nervous glances, as if expecting to see someone following us. Twice she pulled off the highway, abruptly taking meandering detours through small towns before rejoining the interstate. Around noon, she pulled into a truck stop and handed me $10. "Get something for you and your brother to eat. I need to make a call." While Lucas and I stood in line for sandwiches and chips, I watched through the smudged windows as our mother paced beside the car, talking intently on her Nokia phone, the one she rarely let out of her sight. When she saw me watching, she turned away her free hand, making sharp, agitated gestures in the air. "Where are we going?" Lucas asked again as we sat on a concrete barrier eating our lunch. "Is this like a vacation?" "I don't think so," I admitted, not wanting to lie to him. "Mom says we're moving somewhere new." "But what about school? What about my science project?" His voice quavered slightly. "Mrs. Benson was going to help me with the solar system model tomorrow." I put my arm around his thin shoulders, wishing I had answers that would comfort him. "Maybe you'll get to make an even cooler project at your new school." After lunch, the landscape gradually changed from the familiar flat Michigan terrain to the rolling hills of Indiana. Small farms dotted the countryside cornfields, stretching golden in the autumn sun. Under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed the scenery, so different from our urban neighborhood. Late in the afternoon, our mother turned off the highway onto progressively smaller roads until we were traveling on a narrow gravel lane that wound between fields ready for harvest. The car bumped along, sending up clouds of dust behind us. "Almost there," our mother announced the first words she'd spoken in over an hour. Eventually, we turned into a long driveway leading to a white farmhouse with a wide front porch. The house looked well-maintained but modest, with neat flower beds lining the walkway and a large oak tree dominating the front yard. An elderly woman emerged from the front door as we pulled up, shading her eyes against the late afternoon sun. She was tall and angular, with short grey hair, and wore practical jeans with a floral blouse. She didn't smile or wave as we approached, but her face held a cautious kind of patience. "That's Grace," our mother said, applying fresh lipstick using the rearview mirror. "She's my aunt. You'll be staying with her for a while." Lucas and I exchanged confused glances. Our mother had never mentioned having an aunt named Grace, and we had been told our grandparents were all deceased. "Mum," I started, my voice catching with sudden anxiety. "What do you mean we'll be staying? Aren't you staying too?" She avoided my eyes, checking her appearance one last time before opening the car door. "Come on, bring your bags." We followed her up the gravel path to where the woman waited on the porch steps. Up close, I could see Grace was older than she had appeared from a distance, probably in her 70s, with deep lines etching her face and large-knuckled hands that spoke of years of physical work. "Diane." Grace nodded at our mother, her expression unreadable. "These are the children. Hannah and Lucas." Our mother confirmed, her voice unnaturally bright. "Kids, this is Grace. She's going to look after you for a bit while I get some things sorted out." The knot in my stomach tightened. "How long is a bit?" I asked, hearing the tremor in my voice. "Not long," our mother answered vaguely. "Grace has a nice room all ready for you. There's even a dog here. What's his name again? Grace." "Rusty." Grace answered, her eyes moving between my mother and us with what seemed like concern. "He's friendly, good with kids." Lucas brightened slightly at the mention of a dog, but I felt increasingly desperate as I watched this strange exchange. Something was very wrong. "Can I talk to you alone?" I asked my mother, trying to keep my voice steady. "In a minute, honey," she replied with forced cheerfulness. "Let's get your bags inside first." We followed Grace into a tidy living room with simple furniture and handmade quilts draped over the sofa. The house smelled of cinnamon and wood polish, and somewhere a clock ticked loudly in the silence. "Bathrooms down the hall, kitchens through there," Grace explained, pointing. I made up the room upstairs at the end of the hall with twin beds. There's clean towels in the bathroom cabinet. I barely heard her watching my mother, who was shifting her weight from foot to foot, her eyes darting around the room as if mapping escape routes. "Mum," I tried again. "What's going on? When are you coming back for us?" She finally looked at me, and the expression in her eyes made my blood run cold, a mixture of guilt, fear, and something else I couldn't name. "Hannah, I need your phone," she said suddenly. "Mine's almost dead." Confused, I pulled my Nokia from my backpack, the basic cell phone she had given me 6 months ago, for emergencies only. I handed it to her, watching as she slipped it into her purse. "I'll call you from the road," she said suddenly, moving toward the door. "Be good for Grace. Look after Lucas." And then she was hugging us, quick, desperate embraces that felt more like goodbye than "see you soon." She smelled of cigarettes and the perfume she saved for special occasions, her body practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Mom," Lucas's voice was small and frightened. "When will you be back?" "Soon, buddy," she said, already backing toward the door. "Be brave for me, okay?" Before either of us could say another word, she was gone, the screen door banging shut behind her. Through the window, I watched in disbelief as she practically ran to the car, started the engine, and began backing down the driveway. "Mom!" I shouted, rushing to the porch. "Mom!" But the Buick was already turning onto the road, tires spitting gravel, picking up speed as it disappeared behind a stand of trees. I stood frozen on the porch steps, unable to process what had just happened. Behind me, I heard Lucas begin to cry softly. Grace's voice came from the doorway, gentle but firm. "Come on inside now. It'll be getting dark soon." "She took my phone," I said numbly, still staring at the empty road. "She said she'd call, but she took my only phone." Grace sighed heavily. "I think we'd better have a talk." Inside, Grace made hot chocolate, while Lucas and I sat at her kitchen table, shell-shocked and silent. A large red-brown dog with a grey muzzle lay at Lucas's feet, sensing his distress and pressing warmly against his legs. Despite his tears, Lucas had already reached down to stroke the dog's soft ears. "I need to tell you something," Grace said finally, setting mugs in front of us. "And I'm sorry to be the one to say it, but I think you need to know the truth right away." She sat down across from us, her weathered hands wrapped around her own mug. "I'm not your mother's aunt. In fact, I never met your mother before today." The floor seemed to drop away beneath me. "What?" "I'm a friend of Marjorie Williams. She used to work at the diner where your mother waitressed years ago. Your mother called Marjorie last week, and Marjorie called me. I sometimes take in emergency foster placements, being a retired nurse with a spare room." Lucas looked up, confusion written across his tear-stained face. "What does that mean?" I knew exactly what it meant, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Grace's voice was gentle but unflinching. "It means your mother has left you here, and I don't think she's planning to come back anytime soon." And just like that, the last fragments of my childhood shattered around me. That first night in Grace's house was the longest of my life. After her devastating revelation, Lucas had dissolved into heart-wrenching sobs that no amount of comfort could ease. I held him until he finally exhausted himself to sleep on Grace's sofa, Rusty the dog pressed protectively against his side. "He can sleep there tonight," Grace said, draping a quilt over his small form. "Tomorrow, we'll get the bedroom sorted." I sat at the kitchen table long after Lucas fell asleep, my mind spinning with impossible questions. Why had our mother done this? Where had she gone? When would she come back? Grace sat with me, not pushing conversation, but simply providing a steady presence in the midst of my shock. "You should try to get some sleep," she finally said around midnight. "The bedroom upstairs is ready for you." "I can't leave Lucas," I replied, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "He'll be scared if he wakes up alone." Grace nodded, understanding. "I'll bring you a pillow and blanket for the armchair then." I spent that night drifting between shallow sleep and jarring wakefulness, my mind replaying the image of our mother driving away without looking back. Each time I woke, I would check on Lucas, adjusting his blanket or gently touching his hair to reassure myself that at least he was still here, that I hadn't lost everyone. The morning brought no relief, only the stark reality of our situation in the harsh light of day. Lucas woke disoriented and immediately asked for our mother. "She's not back yet," was all I could manage to say. Grace made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast that neither of us could eat, and gently explained what would happen next. "I need to call the authorities today," she told us, her voice kind but matter-of-fact. "When a parent leaves children with someone who isn't family, there are legal procedures that have to be followed." "But she's coming back," Lucas insisted, his face crumpling. "She said she would." I couldn't bear to contradict him, though the hollow certainty in my chest told me otherwise. Our mother had been planning this. The secretive phone call, the night before the hasty departure, taking my phone so we couldn't reach her. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was an escape. Later that morning, Grace allowed me to use her landline phone to try calling our mother's cell. As I expected, the recorded message said the number was no longer in service. I tried the number for the car dealership, where she had worked only to learn she had quit her job 2 weeks earlier. I even called Rick, her ex-boyfriend, but his number had been disconnected as well. It was as if our mother had systematically cut every tie that might lead back to her. The next week passed in a blur of official visits and paperwork. A social worker named Marion came to Grace's house asking gentle but probing questions about our home life, our mother's behavior, and whether we had any relatives who might take us in. I found myself protecting our mother even now, minimizing her absences and erratic behavior, omitting the pills I had found and the strange men who sometimes stayed over. "Hannah, I know this is hard," Marion said during one of our conversations while Lucas was outside with Rusty, "but I need you to be completely honest with me so we can figure out the best way to help you and your brother." Something in her kind, steady gaze broke through my defenses. "She's been different lately," I admitted. "Missing work, sleeping a lot, sometimes not coming home at all. I think she might be using drugs." The words felt like a betrayal, but they were the truth. Marion nodded, making notes in her folder. "Has she ever left you alone before?" "Not like this," I said. "Sometimes overnight, but never like she wasn't coming back." The police became involved, filing a report on our mother as a missing person, though I knew she hadn't been abducted or harmed. She had chosen to disappear. They discovered she had crossed state lines, which apparently complicated jurisdiction issues. They also found that she had been investigated for neglect 3 times in the past year, something I hadn't known, though it explained the occasional visits from official-looking women that our mother had dismissed as insurance paperwork people. Grace, to her immense credit, immediately offered to keep us, while the authorities searched for our mother or any relatives who might claim us. "I'm already approved as an emergency foster parent," she explained to Marion. "They seem settled here, all things considered. Moving them again right now would only add to their trauma." Emergency foster children. The term felt surreal, something that happened to other kids whose stories made the evening news or became after-school specials. Not us, not me. Responsible Hannah, who made dinner and helped with homework and kept everything running when our mother couldn't. Lucas struggled the most visibly with our new reality. He began wetting the bed, something he hadn't done since he was 4. Nightmares woke him screaming nearly every night. During the day, he would sit by the window for hours watching the road for a car that never came. "Why did Mom leave us?" he asked me repeatedly, his eyes wide with confusion and hurt. "Was it because I broke her perfume bottle last month I said I was sorry?" "No, buddy," I would assure him, my heart breaking anew each time. "It wasn't because of anything you did. Mom has adult problems that have nothing to do with us." But privately, I wondered if it was somehow my fault. If I hadn't been responsible enough, hadn't kept the house clean enough, hadn't managed her moods well enough. The weight of failing at a job that should never have been mine in the first place pressed down on me like a physical burden. Grace enrolled us in the local schools, overcoming the hurdles of missing documentation with the help of Marion and the flexibility of the small rural community. The middle school principal, Mr. Atkins, was surprisingly understanding about my situation. "We'll get you caught up, Hannah," he assured me. "I've let your teachers know you might need some extra time with assignments for now." My new classmates were curious about the sudden arrival of a city kid in their tight-knit rural school, but Grace had wisely advised me to simply say I was staying with her while my mother sorted out some things. It was vague enough to avoid the pitying looks or unwelcome questions that the full truth would have prompted. As days stretched into weeks with no word from our mother, I began to create a new routine for Lucas and myself. Mornings meant breakfast with Grace, who packed our lunches with a care our mother had rarely shown. After school, I would help Lucas with homework at Grace's kitchen table, the familiar routine providing a thin thread of normalcy in our upended lives. Grace's home, while unfamiliar, offered stability we had never known. Meals appeared at the same time each day. Clean clothes were always available. The refrigerator was consistently stocked with milk and fresh food. The house was peaceful without shouting or slamming doors or mysterious visitors arriving at odd hours. Rusty the dog became Lucas's constant companion, seemingly understanding his special need for comfort. The aging retriever would follow him from room to room, lying patiently outside the bathroom door when Lucas showered and sleeping at the foot of his bed each night. That dog hasn't moved so much in years, Grace commented one evening as we watched Lucas and Rusty playing gentle tug-of-war in the backyard. Seems he's found his purpose again. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Rivera, at the Community Mental Health Centre, another arrangement orchestrated by Marion the social worker. Initially, I resisted the idea of talking to a stranger about our situation. I'm fine, I insisted to Grace. I need to focus on helping Lucas. You can't pour from an empty cup, Hannah, Grace responded, using one of the old-fashioned sayings that peppered her speech. Taking care of yourself is part of taking care of your brother. In those first sessions with Dr. Rivera, I maintained the composed facade I had perfected over years of covering for our mother. Yes, I was sad, but coping. Yes, I understood it wasn't my fault. No, I wasn't angry, just concerned about Lucas. It wasn't until our fourth session that the walls began to crack. Dr. Rivera had asked a simple question, what I missed most about home, and suddenly I was sobbing great heaving cries that seemed to come from some deep, untouched place inside me. I don't even know what I'm crying about. I gasped when the storm had partially subsided. We're better off here. Grace takes care of us. We have enough food. No one is screaming or disappearing for days. So why does it hurt so much? Because rejection always hurts, Dr. Rivera said gently. And because it's okay to miss your mother, even if life with her was difficult. Even if you're safer now. I guess, yeah, sometimes. Those words, permission to hold contradictory truths simultaneously, became a lifeline in the months that followed. I could be relieved at the stability Grace provided while also grieving the mother who had abandoned us. I could acknowledge that we were better off without our mother's chaos while also feeling the primal wound of her rejection. As 6 months with Grace turned into 8, the official searches for our mother gradually became less intensive. She had effectively disappeared, leaving no trail other than occasional reports of someone matching her description passing through small towns in the West. The authorities shifted their focus from reunification to establishing permanent guardianship for Lucas and me. And then, just as we were beginning to accept our new reality, everything changed again with the arrival of a woman we had never met, but whose eyes looked startlingly like our own. I was helping Grace prepare dinner, carefully cutting vegetables for a stew, when the doorbell rang. Rusty barked once from his spot near Lucas, who was doing homework at the kitchen table. "I'll get it," Grace said, wiping her hands on her apron. I heard the front door open, followed by murmured conversation that quickly took on an urgent tone. "Hannah," Grace called, her voice unusually tight. "Can you come here, please?" In the living room stood a woman in her early 60s, dressed in a neat blue cardigan and slacks, her silver-streaked hair cut in a simple bob. She was clutching a handbag with white-knuckled intensity, and when she turned to look at me, I felt a jolt of recognition, though I had never seen her before. She had my mother's eyes, the same shape and unusual grey-blue colour that Lucas and I had inherited. "Hannah," the woman said, her voice catching. "I'm Eleanor, your grandmother." I froze, unable to process this new shock. We had been told all our grandparents were dead. Our mother had specifically said her parents died in a car accident before Lucas was born. "I know this is a surprise," Eleanor continued when I didn't respond. "I've been searching for you and Lucas for months, ever since I found out what Diane had done." Grace gestured toward the sofa. "Let's all sit down. Hannah, would you get Lucas? He should be part of this conversation too." In a daze, I went to the kitchen and brought Lucas, who looked at the stranger with wary curiosity. When Eleanor saw him, her composed expression crumbled momentarily. "You look just like your grandfather," she said softly. We sat in Grace's living room, an impromptu family reunion none of us had expected. Eleanor explained that she was our mother's mother living in Massachusetts, where she worked as a high school librarian. "Diane and I became estranged about 10 years ago," she explained, her hands restlessly smoothing her slacks. "She developed addiction issues after her father died. We tried to help, but she rejected our support, accused us of trying to control her life. Eventually, she cut off all contact, and we didn't know where she had gone or what had happened to her." Eleanor had only discovered our existence through a series of coincidences. Our mother had listed her as next of kin on an old driver's license. When the Indiana authorities had been unable to locate our mother, they had eventually tracked down this tenuous lead. "I had no idea I had grandchildren," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "All these years not knowing you existed, and then to find out Diane had abandoned you. I came as soon as the social worker contacted me." Lucas, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "If you're our grandma, why didn't Mum ever talk about you?" She said all our grandparents were dead. A flash of pain crossed Eleanor's face. That's a complicated question, Lucas. Your mother and I had serious disagreements, and I think it was easier for her to tell you I was gone than to explain the real situation. I found myself torn between hope and suspicion. Could we trust this woman who appeared out of nowhere claiming to be family? What if she was like our mother? Unstable, unpredictable, eventually disappointing. As if reading my thoughts, Grace asked the practical questions that were swirling in my mind. What are your intentions, Eleanor? Are you looking to establish contact or something more? Eleanor straightened her shoulders, meeting Grace's direct gaze with equal directness. I want to offer Hannah and Lucas a home with me in Massachusetts. I've already been in contact with the social services departments in both states. I've completed the initial home study and background checks. I know it will take time to make this transition, but I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. Another move, another new beginning, another adult making decisions about our lives. But we just got settled here, I protested, looking at Grace. Lucas is doing better in school. I have friends now. We can't just leave. Grace reached over to take my hand. This is a lot to process, Hannah. No one's making any immediate decisions. I understand your hesitation, Eleanor added gently. You don't know me, and you've already experienced too much upheaval. I'm staying at the inn in town for the next week. We can take this slowly, spend some time getting to know each other before anyone talks about moving. Over the next few days, Eleanor visited regularly. She brought old photo albums showing our mother as a child and teenager. Images of a smiling, carefree Diane so different from the troubled woman who had raised us. She shared stories about our grandfather David, a high school science teacher, who had loved astronomy and built a small observatory in their backyard. Lucas, you remind me so much of him, she told my brother as they looked at a photo of our grandfather with a telescope. He would have loved teaching you about the constellations. Gradually, Lucas began to warm to Eleanor, drawn by her gentle attentiveness and genuine interest in his school projects and activities with Rusty. I remained more guarded, watching for signs that she might be hiding instability, like our mother had often done, presenting a good face to the world while chaos churned beneath. But Eleanor was consistent in a way our mother had never been. She arrived when she said she would. She remembered details about our preferences and interests, when she promised to bring Lucas a book about space. The next day, the book appeared exactly as promised. On her fourth day in town, Eleanor invited Grace to join us for dinner at a local restaurant, where the four of us sat somewhat awkwardly, at first the weight of unspoken questions hanging over the table. Finally, Grace asked the question I had been afraid to voice. Have you had any contact with Diane? Do you know where she is now? Eleanor's face tightened almost imperceptibly. The police located her briefly in Arizona 2 months ago. She was arrested for possession but released before they connected her to the alerts about the children. By the time they realized who she was, she had disappeared again. My heart sank at this confirmation of what I had suspected. Our mother had abandoned us to avoid drug charges and was continuing to choose addiction over her children. Will you look for her again? Lucas asked, his voice small. Eleanor reached across the table to cover his hand with hers. The authorities are still trying to find her, Lucas. But right now, my focus is on you and Hannah. As the week progressed, Marion the social worker facilitated more formal discussions about our future. In a meeting at Grace's house, she explained that Eleanor had passed all the necessary background checks and home studies to be considered for permanent guardianship. The courts generally prefer placement with biological family when possible, Marion explained. And since Eleanor has a stable home situation and the means to support 2 children, she presents a viable option for long-term placement. What about what we want? I asked, frustrated that once again adults were making life-altering decisions about us. Don't we get any say? Your preferences absolutely matter, Hannah, Marion assured me. Especially at your age. The judge will take your wishes into account. Later that evening, I found Grace alone on the porch, watching the sunset over her fields. I sat beside her on the wooden swing, the gentle creaking of its chains providing a soothing rhythm. I don't want to leave you, I said finally, the words catching in my throat. You've been more of the mother to us in 8 months than our real mum was in years. Grace was quiet for a long moment, her weathered hand finding mine on the swing between us. I've loved having you and Lucas here, she said finally. You've brought life back to this old house. But Hannah, I'm 72 years old. I can provide a home for now, but Eleanor can offer you something I can't, a long-term future with family. What if she changes her mind? What if she's like our mum? I couldn't keep the fear from my voice. I've spent a good deal of time with Eleanor this week, Grace said thoughtfully. She's not your mother, Hannah. She has a steadiness that Diane never had from what you've told me, and she's already demonstrated her commitment by going through all the legal processes to find you and establish guardianship. But Massachusetts is so far away, I protested. We'd never see you again. Grace smiled, the setting sun highlighting the deep lines around her eyes that came from decades of both laughter and sorrow. Distance doesn't end relationships that matter, Hannah. Besides, Eleanor has already invited me to visit at Christmas. She seems to understand that we've become family too in our own way. Over the next few days, I watched Eleanor with new attention, looking for evidence to either confirm my fears or allay them. I saw how she sat patiently helping Lucas with a difficult math problem, never showing frustration when he struggled to understand. I noticed the genuine interest she showed in my art therapy sessions, asking thoughtful questions about how drawing helped me process emotions. And I observed the respectful way she interacted with Grace, acknowledging her important role in our lives rather than trying to supplant it. Slowly, reluctantly, I began to consider that perhaps this unexpected grandmother might offer the stability we needed. The decision crystallized one evening when I overheard Eleanor on the phone with someone back in Massachusetts. "I'll need at least another 2 weeks here," she was saying. "The children need time to adjust to the idea, especially Hannah. Yes, I understand that means postponing the library renovation, but that's not important right now. These children have been through enough sudden changes in their lives. I won't rush them into another one." It was such a stark contrast to our mother's impulsive decisions, her constant prioritizing of her own needs over ours. Here was an adult actually putting our emotional well-being first, rearranging her life to accommodate our needs rather than the other way around. That night, I sat on the edge of Lucas's bed as I had done every night since we arrived at Grace's, our one constant ritual in a world of uncertainty. "What do you think about Eleanor?" I asked him as Rusty settled at the foot of the bed. "About maybe going to live with her." Lucas considered the question with the serious expression that made him seem older than his 9 years. "I like her," he said finally. "She doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby, and she said they have good science programs at the schools there. Would you be okay moving so far away, leaving Grace and Rusty?" His small face clouded. "I'd miss them a lot, but..." He hesitated, then continued in a small voice. "Mom's not coming back, is she?" The simple question broke my heart. "I don't think so, buddy. Not anytime soon." He nodded, absorbing this hard truth he had likely known for some time. "Then maybe we should go with Grandma Eleanor. She said we'd have our own rooms and there's a lake near her house for swimming in summer." I was struck once again by children's remarkable resilience, their ability to adapt to new realities when given honest information and emotional support. "I think you're right," I said, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "I think it might be our best chance for a real home." The next morning, I told Marion and Eleanor that we were open to the idea of moving to Massachusetts. The relief on Eleanor's face was palpable, and I realized she had been genuinely afraid we might reject her offer. "We'll take it one step at a time," she promised. "I found a house to rent near mine until the legal guardianship is finalized. That way you can have your own space while we get to know each other better." The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Eleanor extended her stay, renting a small apartment in town so she could spend time with us daily while the interstate custody arrangements were processed. Grace helped us begin the emotional work of another transition, encouraging our growing bond with Eleanor, while assuring us that her home would always remain a safe harbor for us. Leaving Grace was one of the hardest things I had ever done. On our last morning at her farm, I found her in the kitchen baking cinnamon rolls, the same breakfast she had made our first full day with her. "Full circle," she said with a smile that didn't quite hide the sadness in her eyes. "You arrived with nothing but a backpack. You're leaving with a future." I threw my arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of cinnamon and the laundry soap she used. "Thank you." I whispered the words utterly inadequate for all she had given us. For everything. Lucas was inconsolable about leaving Rusty clinging to the old dog, with tears streaming down his face. In a moment that confirmed everything I had come to know about Grace's generous heart, she made an unexpected announcement. "Rusty needs to retire to a warmer climate," she declared, watching Lucas with the dog. "He's getting too old for these Indiana winters. If Eleanor agrees, I think he should go with you to Massachusetts." And so our unlikely caravan set off eastward, Eleanor driving her sensible blue sedan with Lucas and Rusty in the back seat, while I rode with Grace in her pickup truck, loaded with the belongings we had accumulated during our 8 months together. It was nothing like the furtive, frightening departure with our mother. This journey had been planned, discussed, prepared for, with care for our emotional needs. As we crossed the Massachusetts state line 2 days later, I felt a strange mixture of grief and hope. We were leaving behind the trauma of abandonment, driving toward a future none of us could have imagined a year earlier. Grace would return to Indiana after helping us settle in, but she had already booked a return visit for Christmas, true to her promise that our connection would endure, despite the distance. Eleanor's small Cape Cod-style house in the western Massachusetts town of Amherst became our new home. True to her word, Lucas and I each had our own bedroom, simple spaces that Eleanor encouraged us to decorate however we wanted. The nearby lake became our sanctuary that first summer, a place to process the tumultuous changes through the simple rhythms of swimming and exploring the shoreline. With Eleanor's steady support, we began to rebuild our lives again. She enrolled Lucas in a school with a strong science program and found an art-focused high school that accepted me despite the mid-year transfer. She found therapists for both of us, recognizing that the wounds of abandonment required professional support to heal properly. Most importantly, she created a home environment completely different from what we had known with our mother. Consistent, peaceful, and attentive to our needs without being suffocating. When Lucas had nightmares, she would sit with him until he fell back asleep, a steadfast presence in the darkness. When I struggled with trust issues and built emotional walls, she remained patient, giving me space while ensuring I knew her support was unwavering. 5 years passed in this new life. I thrived academically, discovering a passion for art therapy that eventually led to a scholarship at the State University. Lucas grew from a frightened 9-year-old into a confident teenager who joined the science club and made the honor roll consistently. Eleanor became simply and profoundly our grandmother, the foundation of the stable family we had never had before. During those years, we received exactly one phone call from our mother. It came 3 years after she had driven away a collect call from somewhere in California. Her voice sounded thin and distant. Her words slurred as she asked vague questions about how we were doing, making no mention of her disappearance or the trauma she had caused. "Are you coming to see us?" Lucas asked hopefully, still harboring a child's capacity for forgiveness despite everything. "Not right now, buddy," she answered vaguely. "Things are complicated, but I think about you guys all the time." After that brief, unsatisfying conversation, we didn't hear from her again. Eleanor tried to trace the call, working with the authorities who still had an open case file on our mother, but the trail quickly went cold. While Lucas was initially devastated by this renewed abandonment, the strong support system we had developed helped him process his disappointment and continue healing. In college, I focused my studies on childhood trauma and art therapy, drawing on my own experiences to develop compassion for others with similar wounds. During a graduate school workshop, I met David, a thoughtful special education teacher, whose patient nature and emotional stability attracted me immediately. Unlike my previous relationships, which had unconsciously mimicked the chaos of my early life, my connection with David was built on mutual respect and healthy boundaries. When we married 3 years later, Eleanor walked me down the aisle while Lucas, now 20, and studying astronomy at college, just like our grandfather had served as my man of honor. Grace, despite her advancing years, made the journey from Indiana to celebrate with us Rusty's successor, a gentle golden retriever named Sunny, accompanying her. It was around this time that we received the news we had always known might come someday. Our mother had been found dead of an overdose in a motel room in Nevada. She was 42 years old and had been living under an assumed name for years. The grief I felt was complicated, mourning not just her death, but the relationship we never had the mother she could have been if addiction hadn't consumed her. In the weeks that followed, I created a series of paintings that helped me process these complex emotions, eventually developing them into an art therapy program specifically designed for children of parents with substance abuse issues. Lucas, in his own way, found closure through a telescope he built for the local elementary school, dedicating it to both our mother and our grandfather, connecting the scientific passion he had inherited from a man he never met with the complicated legacy of the woman who had given him life, but not much else. On my 37th birthday, Eleanor hosted a family dinner at her home, now expanded to include David, our 2-year-old daughter Grace, named for the woman who had saved us, Lucas and his fiancée May, and of course our aging canine companion Rusty Jr. As I looked around the table at these people who had become my chosen family, I was struck by how life's most painful moments can sometimes redirect us to our greatest blessings. Being abandoned by our mother at 14 was traumatic in ways that took years of therapy to fully address. Yet that abandonment ultimately delivered Lucas and me from an increasingly dangerous environment, into the care of people who could provide the stability, safety, and love we desperately needed. Without that devastating Tuesday morning, I might never have become an art therapist helping other trauma survivors. Lucas might never have discovered his talent for science and teaching. We might never have known our grandmother Eleanor, whose quiet strength became the foundation upon which we rebuilt our lives. Most significantly, we broke the cycle of dysfunction that had claimed our mother. My daughter would grow up in a home with consistent routines, clear boundaries, and unconditional love, never wondering if her mother might suddenly disappear, never bearing adult responsibilities while still a child herself. That abandoned 14-year-old girl watching her mother's taillights disappear down a gravel road could never have imagined the full, meaningful life that would eventually emerge from that moment of profound loss. Sometimes the most painful endings create space for better beginnings. Sometimes being left behind is the first step toward finding where you truly belong. Looking back at my journey from abandoned teenager to fulfilled adult, I'm struck by how the worst day of my life ultimately set me on a path toward healing and wholeness. When my mother drove away from Grace's farmhouse that September afternoon, I thought my world had ended. I couldn't see then how that painful rupture would eventually lead to genuine connection, how being abandoned would teach me the true meaning of family. Today my own daughter is 7. 7 years of consistent love, bedtime stories, and the secure knowledge that her mother will always come back when she says goodbye. When she asks about my childhood, I share age-appropriate truths about her grandmother Diane, explaining addiction as a disease that sometimes makes people unable to care for themselves or others properly. These conversations are difficult but necessary. Planting seeds of compassion without sugarcoating the reality of how addiction damages families. Lucas has become a high school science teacher, inspired by the grandfather he never met and mentors who helped him channel his natural curiosity into academic achievement. He still calls Eleanor every Sunday without fail, their bond a testament to how chosen family can be, as meaningful as biological connections. Last year, he and May welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Eleanor Grace, a living tribute to the 2 women who changed the trajectory of our lives. Grace herself lived to the remarkable age of 93, remaining a beloved part of our extended family until her peaceful passing 3 years ago. Her farmhouse in Indiana has become our summer gathering place, maintained by a trust she established specifically to keep it in our family. There each July, our children run through the same fields where Lucas and I began our healing journey, creating new memories in a place that once witnessed our deepest pain. As for our mother, we honored her memory in the way that felt most authentic, by understanding her struggles without excusing the harm she caused, by acknowledging that her abandonment, while devastating, ultimately led us to safety. The Art Therapy Center where I work now includes a program for children of parents with substance use disorders, creating a space where they can express through art what they often cannot say in words. That it's possible to love someone who hurts you, to miss someone you're better off without. The lessons of my journey are woven into everything I do. I've learned that family is defined by actions rather than blood, that healing doesn't mean forgetting, but finding meaning in painful experiences. Most importantly, I've discovered that resilience isn't about being unbreakable, but about growing stronger at the broken places. Have you experienced abandonment, or had your life changed by someone walking away? How did you rebuild afterward? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else feeling lost or left behind. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation. And don't forget to share with someone who might need to know that sometimes being abandoned creates space for something better to enter your life. Thank you for walking this path with me, and remember, your worth is not determined by those who leave, but by the strength you find in continuing forward.